Is it working now? Man, the feed sucks. Hey, what is happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Saturday evening. Want to talk to you guys a little bit about taking little Miss Revlon down to the drag strip, doing some data logging on that 309 gear. So first of all, let me give you guys an idea as far as how the conditions looked. First of all, it's August in Houston, Texas. Slash Lazen, you are the first in. Mark Coglione, then getting professor with the arm flex. I like it. So check it out, guys. It is August in Houston. It is hot all the time. Now, one of the funny things people talk about when they talk about, you know, Houston or New Orleans, Louisiana weather, stuff like that is it's hot. It's hot. Well, it gets hot in other places, but it cools off at night. Down here, it never cools off. I'm telling you guys, right now it's like 9:30 at night here, and I'm not kidding. It's like 87 degrees, 100% humidity. It never cools off. I don't care if it gets to 100 degrees. It ain't gonna cool off much more than that. And those are the conditions that we're running in. All of us have the same conditions. So, Slash was saying, same with Omaha, man. I'm telling you, it is so hot, muggy, nasty. It's just gross. So I wanted to get data on the car in the absolute worst conditions that I possibly could. The reason for that is when you're doing transmission tunes, one of the biggest problems is the predictive shift algorithm and making sure that you're basically getting the worst case scenario so that your shift point is basically as high as it's going to be when the temperature is high and the humidity is high. Car's not making a lot of power. Anyway, long story short, nailed the transmission tune down. Shift points, I don't have any of them going above 6350, which is what I consider to be a pretty safe range for the Hellcat. You can actually turn them a little bit harder, but the issue that you run into then is, you know, potential fuel quality concerns, I guess you can put it. Anyway, adding a little bit of fuel to the car, but not putting any extra timing in it whatsoever. In fact, that's like the last thing that I want to do is throw timing into this car, especially with the quality of 93 octane being what it is. I got the time slips here, but I want to say what's up to everybody checking in. Let's see. Coyote Car Guy saying it's 80 degrees in Florida right now. I like it. Wish it was 80 degrees here. Dimitri saying, hey, what's up? Ruben, what's going on? B, what's watching from hot California? Man, I miss California. I miss California during this time of the year, actually. NorCal is where I was living. GP's checking in. Did you check in the Daytona Edition Hellcat Charger? Yeah, I did. I think it's a good-looking car, and I think that it's going to be a big hit because, to me, the wide body just fits the Charger so well. Dimitri checking in, saying, yep, it's Rift. I like it. So let's get to the time slips real quick because I want to make sure that we don't lollygag around here. I'm going to put these in order as far as time. Now, if you haven't seen, I did a live ride along for my very last pass of the night, or what ended up being the very last pass of the night. The reason why it ended up being the last pass of the night is because with this kind of humidity and with the grains that we had, the track was just going away. Obviously it's a street night, so you're not going to see a whole lot of prep going on. But at any rate, the car did great. It's just that Mother Nature and physics and all of that. So anyway, here's the first pass of the night. It happened at about 7:30, and I'm hoping that focuses for you there. That 1058 at 130.87 miles per hour. Not too shabby. Hey, Riv, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Checking in with the $3 donation to the cause. I do appreciate that very much, man. I truly do. So thank you very much. Air density online, this is going off of ADOL, 2,773 feet, 92% total air density. But the key note here is grains. And what grains is basically like a humidity number. a little bit more specific than a regular like X number percent humidity. Grains were 135. I'm going to repeat that, 135. And I want to say temperature was like 87 degrees, maybe even 90 degrees. She still went a 10.58 at 130.87. Now, for you guys that are with a 158 60 foot, for my 8th mile brethren, 6.822 at 104.05 mile an hour. So what does that represent? Well, the rear gear basically picked up about 1.5 tenths, but the mile an hour is the biggest catch here. The mile an hour went up by, to be honest, guys, I mean, a almost solid 2 mile an hour on the big end of the track. And the reason for that is that you're actually now able to use 4th gear and 5th gear on the back half of the track. The way that the car was set up before with the 262 is it would pull fantastically up to about the 8th mile. And at about that point, gear ratios being what they were, the car just would not leg out very well on the big end. And it's, of course, still at stock power. You might even make the argument it's slightly neutered because I'm adding just a tad bit of fuel at the very tail end of the RPM range just to be a little bit more on the safe side. But I mean, it is a minuscule amount of fuel that I'm adding to the car. So at any rate, 10.58 right off the bat. Rip is checking in saying, would it really make a difference if I got 18-inch wheels compared to the 20s with the Mickey Thompsons I have? Yes, it absolutely will. Saying I'm having a hard time launching with the 20-inch Mickey Thompson ET Street 305 35s. Yeah, those are not going to help you a ton. I mean, there are guys that have cut 165, 162 60 foots with those tires, but that's been in lower DA. The big issue with that setup, though, is just the weight alone. A move to an 18-inch wheel, you're going to chop off both sides combined close to at least 20 pounds, if not 25 total pounds. Shoot, now that I think about it, no, it's more like 35 or 40 pounds just in the rear tire setup, rear wheel setup. A set of Bravados with a set of 305, I think they're 40, 305, 40, 18. You might check that out. But that wheel and tire setup is a known strong performer. So it will help you, and it'll basically make the car so much easier to launch that you won't want to run it at the drag strip without them. In fact, I don't even run my street setup at the drag strip anymore for two reasons. One, Tri-5Rs are expensive, and I run a 20-inch wheel on the street. And two, the car just hooks so much better with a 17-inch, and really at this power level, 18-inch is just fine too. Riff's also asking, are bead locks necessary for a stock Hellcat or one with a 285 pulley? Not in the least. I'm not saying that they're going to hurt anything, but at this power level, you just don't really need them. I'm not running them on my car, and the car does great. So, yeah, don't worry about bead locks at this power level at all. Speed Freak's asking, what has to be done when going to a 17-inch wheel on a Challenger Hellcat? End links? That's all you need. 17-inch wheel on the rears, yes, that's all you need are the end links. Now, for the fronts, you're going to have to go with an 18-inch wheel, and that 18-inch wheel, and when I say barely clears, I mean it totally barely clears, but it will clear your brakes. No issues with the Dark Stars. And that being said, I do recommend the Dark Stars or the Recluse wheels. They're a bit more of a robust wheel, and you need something that's got some to it if you're going to be running any type of a drag pack setup on one of these Mopars, because they're just so dang heavy. And that's I'll get to that. If you guys have questions on drag packs and my thoughts on those, ask them. I can kind of go off on a tangent with that. Or after I get done with the time slips, remind me and I'll get into that. But the setup that I've got is stable on the street, stable at the drag strip, and I really like the stability over the slight weight savings that a set of bias plies would give you. So anyway, we can get back around to that here in a sec. Rift is asking, when do you start to need a brake conversion when it comes to wheel size on a Hellcat? Talking about the rear wheel. 15s is when you would need to do the conversion. And I don't recommend ever doing a 15-inch conversion on these cars unless we're talking about you running a boatload of power. And at that point, I'm going to suggest stripping the car as much as possible, get the weight down as far as you can. Man, look, there's a lot of guys going really quick on 17-inch wheels. And the good thing about 17s is that you don't compromise the factory braking capabilities by going with smaller brakes, lighter weight brakes, things like that. Another thing I want you to consider before you start throwing money at a rear brake conversion or a front and rear brake conversion, which, you know, by the way, it's not a bad thing. I mean, there are setups you can run on this. I think guys have run scat pack brakes and things like that. Not that big of a deal. They'll stop you just fine. But what I'll caution you is on the 15-inch conversion, those lightweight brakes are thin. And again, you've got to remember that this is not a 3,500-pound car. This is a very heavy car going very fast down a quarter mile, and you don't want to be overtaxing the brakes at that point. You know, I would say, you know, at the time that you would need to go with a 15-inch conversion, you've already gotten the car so unimaginably fast at that point that man, you might have should have already started off with a different platform. I know that's a bit of a controversial statement, all things considered, but I have to tell you that there are better and easier and cheaper ways to go, and I'm talking about like deep into the 9-second zone here before you even need to worry about this conversion. But if you've gotten your car to that level, then you will have already experienced the pain of the procedure and the pain of the process. So I would wholeheartedly suggest sticking with the 17. If you're going to put the kind of power down that's going to require you to go with a 15, just know that at that point you need to be going at least 920s, 940s, you know, will also be kind of in that mix. But around that 940 range, really 950, 940 range, you might want to look into it. But if the car is back halving at about 150 miles an hour plus anyway, you're going to want to have laundry on the back of it, parachute, because you do not want to try to slow down 4,200 pounds plus driver from 150 miles an hour plus using only more or less your front brakes. It's a stability issue more than anything else based on the mass. So take that for what it's worth. Speed Freak, easy to install end links. You can literally accidentally install the end links. Yes, they are super, super easy. Hey, Rick is saying, so I finally got into the 10s with my Hellcat. I like it. Congratulations. See, I got a 1095. Is that as far as I can push my stock Hellcat with just the Driveshaft and differential brace that I have? No, man. If you've got, I'll put you like this. If you've got a stock Driveshaft, you know, jury's a little bit out on that. And I'll get into drive shafts here in a minute because drive shafts actually kind of play a big part in the talk tonight. But if depending on the DA that you're running the car in, if you're not running it in super deep mine shaft air, I think that your stock drive shaft is fine. But there are a lot of guys running it like say 1,500 foot DA that, you know, 1,500 foot DA, any garden variety Hellcat is going to be somewhere in the 10s, 1080, 1070, maybe on a drag pack, or, you know, 1090 on a true drag radial. I think at those power levels and in those conditions on a prepared track, I think you're okay. I wouldn't worry about it too much. But it just depends on, you know, if the number is what you're going after, and you've got a stock drive shaft, just remember that, I'm sorry, Rick's saying I do have a DSS one piece. Dude, throw the kitchen sink at it if that's the case. Don't worry about it at all. Launch it as hard as you like, and that drive shaft and the diff brace and everything else is not going to be phased. What happens and where the diffs start to fail is guys running these things with a trans brake. The case itself on that rear end is it's good, but it's not awesome. And again, you got to remember the weight that we're talking about. If that diff was in a 3,700 pound car, I mean, you'd be running 8s with that thing. So, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Really, there's guys who run 8s with it anyway. So don't worry about it. Tire, throw whatever tire you want on it. Just keep in mind, Revlon is, was at least, even in the worst conditions, I mean the worst conditions, the way she sits right now, straight 93, no race gas, consistent 1070s. And now with the gear, consistent low 1060s, with a couple of burbles here and there, and I'll get to those here in just a second. In fact, I'm about to jump right in the middle of that. Dimitri was saying, Rip said I was too scared to get the carbon fiber one. I've seen videos of those blowing up. Yeah, I wouldn't get that one. So let's get back into these time slips. So fresh right off the bat, 1058, that's its stock power with a 309 gear. Now, I made a change to the tune. The change that I made was on the 2-3 shift. I had changed the shift point to be a little bit higher on the 2-3 because the second to third shift is the largest drop in RPM. So I was trying to bring that RPM up a little bit, dropped it down about 1%. But on that pass, right after you tune a car, the adaptive doesn't know what to do, and so it'll yip shift all the way down the track, which means it'll pull and then pull again. It's basically, we call it a yip in just like the colloquialism for it. On that pass, this is actually kind of funny. The car went a 1069 at 130 miles an hour with a 160 60 foot. Now, that's kind of relevant because it was literally stumbling, falling upstairs, trying to sort out its shift points on its way to a 1069. Still quicker than its fastest pass in better DA the last time at the drag strip. So that was fresh after a tune, by the way. So you got to give her a pass on that. So I brought the car back around into the pits, plugged in my taser, had it on cooldown for about 15 minutes, maybe 20. If it was 15, it was 20, kind of one of those things, but it didn't go over 20 minutes, and immediately ran the car right back into the staging lanes where I was able to pull the car around and make another pass. Now with the car boiling hot. Now, let me get you understand. When I got done with the burnout, my engine coolant temperature was at 196 degrees. 196 degrees. Nothing really got a chance to cool off. I literally, the whole purpose behind this run was, number one, to validate the tune for the transmission shift points, and number two, well, I wanted to get a piping hot pass out of the car with the understanding, and you got to remember, I'm literally trying to put the car in the worst possible DA conditions and the worst possible run conditions that I could. And we were rewarded with a 1065 at just south of 130 miles an hour. This pass, it was actually pretty funny because I don't know that I've ever run the car with the engine coolant temperature that high. So again, 1065 at call it 100, almost 130, 129.85 is still almost 2 miles an hour faster on the back half of the track. It's still a solid full half-tenth faster than its fastest pass the previous weekend, but in terms of average, a full tenth quicker. And it still went a 160 60 foot. So that leads us to the final pass of the evening, and this is where the live ride-along would kick in. So I let the car cool off for a little bit. The grains were getting high, and you know it's getting bad when you just can't stop sweating. I mean, there wasn't a dry shirt to be seen. It was actually pretty interesting. So anyway, got the car back down. I think coolant temperature was about 186 when I made this pass. And she went, that's the 1060 at 130 miles per hour. So again, I got to tell you, the car picked up a solid, honest to goodness, full tenth. And realistically, the mile an hour or two that it picked up on the back half of the track really doesn't tell the tale of how much stronger the car feels going down the track. That's probably the biggest takeaway that I had, was just how much more fun the car is to drive with the 309. One other takeaway that I want to bring up here is how much easier the car is to nail reaction times with. With the 309 gear, it is practically impossible for me to not cut a .0 something 60 I mean a .0 60 foot, a .0 something reaction time. With the 262, it just felt like the car needed to load up a little bit more before it got going. Well, now with 15% better torque multiplication, the car doesn't need to load up, it just takes off. It's one of the reasons why I red lit an 023 on my first pass. Moving down the line, when I was paying attention to the light instead of looking at my computer, making sure it was data logging, it was 060, 050, like it was nothing, literally almost by accident. So that was another benefit to having that 309 gear, is it took the car less time to react. I was getting better reaction times, and quite honestly, it just made the car a little bit more fun to drive. And as far as the driving experience at the drag strip, the biggest place where you feel the difference is in gears 4 and 5. It just wants to keep pulling through fourth. Significantly stronger, and then fifth, obviously, where the car really needs to leg out. Perfect gear selection for a car with stock power. As far as running through the traps, it shifts into sixth about 2 car lengths before the traps or right at the traps. So I couldn't ask for a better setup for in terms of how the power the car is making versus how it's getting down the track. I'm sure in colder conditions, lower DA, it's going to shift a little bit sooner than that, mainly because the car is just going to be going faster. But yeah, that shift into sixth is right at the traps, which makes it really nice. Rick is saying, I was watching a video earlier about the fastest stock Hellcat from 2018, and I saw your 392 run in the early 11s, and I was really impressed with that. Thanks, man. Yeah, that car was, there Rick's got the double arms, I like it. That car was a lot of fun, man. I miss the 392 car, I really do. Schlatter was a sweetheart, and I got to tell you, a lot of fun to drive, a lot of fun to take down the drag strip. And yeah, so there's times where I do miss that car quite a bit. Doc Dips checking in. What's up, B? What's up, Doc? Rip's saying the vid was called Fastest Stock Hellcat in the World by RP. That's right. Yeah, actually, his car ran pretty good. Let's see. SRT Jimmy, his dad's Hellcat, I think, was a little bit quicker than his, but compared to how Revlon runs, it wouldn't even be close. This would have been, a 60 versus a 40 back then. So yeah, it's interesting just with, tires and a little bit of weight reduction, how much these cars can actually pick up. Sam saying, Yo, Mace, I just heard that a mid-engine Mopar is coming from an internal source. Actually, Dodge had the 405, I think is what it was called. It's actually a Chrysler product. They had a mid-engine concept that just never did get off the ground. Be cool if they brought that thing back. Check that out. Google that, Chrysler mid-engine sports car, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Really cool car, by the way, and it's a shame they never did release it. I think that would have gone actually farther to bolster the image of Dodge or Mopar just in general than the Viper even did, but then the Viper took off and was amazingly successful. So, it is something pretty cool. Dr. Div saying, when's the track night and what type of cash do you need? I'll PayPal it to you, bro. Hit me up tomorrow. I'll give you the specifics on that, but it'll be January the 11th. And we are going to limit it to 20 total cars, really 20 total drivers. We got a couple of guys who are bringing a couple of cars. That's fine with me as long as it's going to be limited to the number of drivers being at 20. I'm cool with that. But hit me up tomorrow and I'll walk you through the procedure on that one. DESRT sub B got the flex. I like it. Shawnee's in the house saying, I think with your gears and trans tune, you have 100% altitude corrected your car. Your car is physically unable to run slower than a 1070, maybe with pulling a trailer. So I'll tell you this, Sean, you know, the whole idea behind this car was to do a total physical DA correction. We actually beat that by about half a tenth with the gears now. We were right on top of it at that 1065-ish range. Now with the gears, it is a complete DA corrected car and then some. And what I mean by that is I now have a car that is more fun to drive, especially with the addition of driver command torque, which you have to have with a 309 gear, just because they feel so soft without it. But with just a standard issue, 10% increase in driver command torque, and you can put that wherever you want on the scale, by the way. Some guys like it earlier and down low. I like to kind of blend that in, just interpolate that 10% up to about, say, half throttle. And what that'll do is that'll make that throttle curve more linear. The stock throttle curve kind of goes like this with a little yip at the end. I like to make mine a little bit more linear. Makes it act like a cable actuated throttle is what it basically feels like, with a slight concentric. So, you know, a slight up curve at the very top. But, you know, I'll tell you something. The car is just so much more fun to drive now. And, you know, drive shaft issues aside, the thing is a complete joy to drive. And oddly enough, it's one of these types of situations where you look at it and go, man, it should have come that way from the factory. And in fact, when we're talking about this car, and the gears and everything else, one question that doesn't really ever come up, but it should, is fuel economy. How does this gear affect fuel economy? And to be honest with you guys, it hasn't. I mean, just driving the thing around, data logging it, you know, just typical cruising around in the car, no difference. And on the highway, let me think about this. On the highway, it's still knocking down like 23 miles per gallon. So if there is a difference, it's not very noticeable. I mean, we're talking, you know, less than a couple of percentage. I mean, I don't even think it'd be a couple of percentage points. So, you know, we're talking, you know, 23.2 versus 23.0 type of a situation. At least that's what I'm noticing so far. Haven't put that really to the test too deeply yet, but that's kind of where it's fallen into place. So, let's see. Rick is asking, so what are your thoughts on a new Viper being a V8? I know that has been a thing that they have discussed, and I don't think this is letting the cat out of the bag here, but back in, when was I at Mecum? I have to go back and look, but it's been coming up on 3 years ago. I talked to a rep from Mopar, and he was really candid with me. We got to talking about me being a former Viper owner. I've owned 3 of them, as a matter of fact. The SRT Challenger, now the Hellcat, but at that point I just ordered my Challenger. And the interesting thing was we got into a discussion. It ended up being about 2 hours long about, and a lot of this had to do with the Viper. It had to do with where the brand was going, what was coming up next as far as performance vehicles that they were looking into. Obviously, the 392 Durango was in its planning stages. Actually, no, it was in prototype stage at that point. The SRTG, basically, it was just, he was saying they're going to try to Hellcat everything. The truck was being looked at as a viable platform at that point. But the main thing was talking about the Viper. If you were to have been involved in that conversation or just been a fly on the wall, it was refreshing just to hear somebody talk about that car the same way that we would talk about it, as opposed to, you know, somebody trying to sell you the car or try to tell you something any different. The guy was pretty honest, and he said, look, the problem with the Viper is that it cannot stand alone on its own as a brand the way that Corvette can. You have to keep in mind that Corvette, as it stands, is incredibly profitable. And because of that, you know, that particular brand can literally stand on its own. It can support its own factory, its own workforce, its own marketing division, engineering, the whole bit. The Viper couldn't do that. And the reason why is because the Viper just flat out doesn't appeal to 50% of the population, which are female. A lot of the buying demographic for a Corvette are female, and they're also automatics, which makes it easy for anybody to just get in the car and drive it. Viper didn't have that. And at the time, there was a white Viper at the show, and he even asked, he said, you know, we had talked about the fact that I had just placed the order for my 392, and you know, had talked to him about my plans with that car, naturally aspirated. I like that idea over the supercharged Hellcat. You know, asking me what my plans were for it, and I discussed, you know, some things with him, and he said, let me ask you something. If I told you you could cancel your order, I'd cancel your order for you for the Challenger and sell you this Viper at 82 grand, would you buy it? I was like, man, I'd love to, but I just can't afford it. I said, if it were, you know, in the $65,000 or $75,000 range, maybe we could talk about it. And he stopped me mid-sentence. He goes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. He goes, we can't even sell cars to guys that have owned 3 of these cars. How am I going to sell it to somebody who's never driven one before? And so anyway, that's kind of how the conversation went. Again, this is going over the course of about 2 hours. I'm saying 2, it might have been a little bit longer than that. We kind of got lost up in conversation for a while, and got into some pretty nitty-gritty things about what they're doing and what they were looking at, and focus groups that they had looked into, and just everything with you know, from a comparative analysis point of view. At that time, the Viper was just really not going to be part of the conversation moving forward, because it was simply not a viable platform. So people, let me just kind of switch gears here. So people talk about cars that they love. The Magnum is one of them. I even jokingly said, yeah, man, you need to bring back the Magnum. And he goes, will you buy one? And I said, well, I mean, I guess if you brought it back. And he goes, yeah, if. The problem is that nobody bought enough of those things to keep it afloat to begin with. So it's kind of interesting to see the business side of the industry as it, you know, takes on its marching orders. How and where that can actually lead the conversation and lead the product development, which leads you into, you know, this is also not that I, you know, not bragging, but knew about the Demon even then, and but I didn't know anything about it. I knew that it was a thing, but I didn't know that it was, you know, going to be what it ended up being. And nobody really did. But he said, yeah, we're going to have a higher horsepower version of the Hellcat, and he just kind of glazed over that. But here's the thing. The funny thing is that he was more surprised, not to belay the point here, but he was actually more surprised with the success of the Hellcat than he was with the failure of the Viper. So, but yeah, that's something that they've been looking into for a while. Not only to streamline the car, but to make the car more accessible to more people just in general. Shawnee's saying, I'm 20 minutes behind on live. Head for your result. Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. Lightning Blue Meanie. Cheeky fuck. I like this. Say, what's up, Mason? I know this stream is about fast cars, but did you see the weight of the GT500? That is funny, man. Yeah, so 4,200 pounds for the GT500. And what I've been saying is, look, you know, you might want to start curbing the whole, you know, barge or, you know, freighter moniker for the Challenger, because look, GT500's checking in a little portly too. That girl's been sitting at the buffet a little too long as well, which, you know what? God love her for it. But the fact of the matter is that car is going to be heavy, and I've been sweating the that transmission in that car on a tire. Who knows? It might be the next best thing to sliced bread, and it could be the most robust transmission in the world. I hope for Ford's sake that it is. You know what? I'll take that a step further. I'll hope that for just, you know, American hot rod, muscle car, pony car, all of that, I hope that it is as robust and as stout as it needs to be to handle the use, misuse, and abuse that it will be put through, because if it's not, that is going to be the worst failure that Ford could have possibly made. But yeah, 4,200 pounds, damn, for sure. Rip saying, yeah, light. Dr. Div saying, I need a spot because I'm going to be on the new engine. I'll give you a call when I get up, unless you sleep in the AM. Dude, sleeping in for me is like 8 o'clock. So yeah, I'll be up, bro. DSRT, yes, saying it was the Hemi 412. That's the one I'm thinking of. And Sam saying there was the Chrysler Hemi concept. Yeah, the early 2000s concept. I mean, there was really some cool stuff back then. And, back then, so if you guys aren't aware, back in the early 2000s, late 1900s, early 2000s, Dodge was so awesome with concept cars. The concept cars that came to life, like the Prowler, which it needed a V8. The V6 was a failure on that thing, but still a really cool car. You had the Copperhead, you had the ME 412, you had a bunch of really neat concept cars coming from Dodge at the time, and that's really what helped to set the stage moving forward. But yeah, some really cool stuff from back then. Rick is saying, I have somebody who's willing to sell me a 309 here for my Hellcat for around $2,000. Is that a good price? No, that's a horrible price. You can get 309 gears from the dealership for $1,500, and I think MMX is running a special on them right now. They had a big buy on them or something like that, and they're down to like just the lower side of $1,000. So anyway, check those out. But yeah, that's not a good price at all on that gear whatsoever. Not even installed. He needs to come to, even with the install, I'd tell him, look, you got to come down about $500-700 on that deal. Dr. Div saying, yeah, the DS makes some noise. Driveshaft makes some noise. I noticed the drive on the drive home last night. It's actually not noise. What you're hearing is the package tray rattling. So let me get to that point too. So I talked to DSS in depth on Friday. I did install myself, I'm doing my own work over here, the new DSS Driveshaft with the CV joints on either end, as opposed to, it's actually propped up against the wall over here, the DSS with the CV only on one end. And there really wasn't much of a difference between the two. I've been told that there's some forums that DSS is still working through some issues with that. But in talking to the guys at DSS, they've been having hell with getting a drive shaft to work with some of these 15, 16 and up cars because of the pinion angle on the rear. It basically faces up a little bit, and that's causing some driveline angle issues, which you might imagine, Dr. Diff, you'll know what I'm talking about. The pinion angle is huge when it comes to keeping everything in sync. And the problem is that if you have too much of an angle over here and this angle is doing this, you're going to have a weird vibration coming from the back end, or vice versa. All right. However that's going to work out. If you have them both jacked up, the whole thing's going to mess up. Everything can be at the same angle. It just has to be in unison. That was a weird thing I was doing with my hands too. Anyway, but the rear diff is the issue. They're working on a fix for it right now. I'm hoping to be in the pool to get in on that. I don't know if they're going to try to figure out a way to shim the rear end down, or how that's all going to come about. But they are working on that, and kudos to them. Good on them for that. And they make some great products. And by the way, under load, this thing is fine. It's really under steady state cruise where you get an issue. So I'd be cool if it were only singing, but that's really not the case. But they are working on that, and amongst other things that they're working on. So just bear with them. They're going to get it all sorted out. It's just these cars are tougher to get sorted out than other cars, just because of how the driveline is. And by the way, the reason why the rear diff kind of faces up a little bit in these cars, because it has a two-piece drive shaft. So The drive shaft from the transmission goes to a carrier bearing in the middle, and then that goes down and over to the rear diff. Well, they have it kind of kicked up so that it matches the angle, I guess, of the dangle there, which can create an issue when you're trying to put a one-piece drive shaft together. Let's see. Oh, Sam saying, he also said, talking about the newer stuff, he also said, keep a lookout for the limited edition Charger with the Hellcat powertrain and possibly all-wheel drive. Well, we already got the Hellcat Charger, so it'd be cool all-wheel drive, though. Rip's saying, my drive shaft makes some noise even though it is dampened, the dampened version. Yeah. I don't think you're going to get away from that. The big issue there is just you've got a big, long piece of aluminum that you're working with. And I get it, you know, trucks don't seem to have this problem even with single-piece drive shafts. But you got to remember that the trucks don't have the same angle issues that these cars have. So, but yeah, you're going to have a little bit of singing here. Rip said, I think the Viper could stand alone if they made it a better price point and had an automatic version like you said. Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of what the big issue is with that car. And really, guys, in this day and age, you can't just hang your hat on a halo car like a Viper. It doesn't really work like that. There's not enough money in it. And really, even with the Viper, this is just the truth. I mean, the Viper wasn't enough of a draw to get people into a dealership. You know, the way that maybe like a Ford GT would be, even though you would never see one of those in a dealership. So it's kind of a bad analogy, but there's just no good reason to have a car like the Viper unless you can turn units. And if you can't turn units with it, what's the point? I mean, they're in business to make money, and it's a nice thought to think that you're going to put something out that's going to be, set the table for the brand, set the tone and the attitude for the brand, but you don't need a Viper. Have you seen a Hellcat? The other thing is when it comes to sports cars are cool, but they have to do sports car things. And the problem with the Viper is that it just doesn't handle all that great. They look fantastic, and yeah, you can, once you learn to drive them, you can make them handle well, but the Corvette just inherently handles better. It's a more balanced platform, so you've got that you're up against. So a V8 would do several things. It would consolidate the power plant to a smaller unit, which would kind of help to centralize center of gravity, whether it's in the front, the back, front mid, rear mid, whatever, doesn't matter. But the second thing that it would do is it would make it a V8. Presumably that would be considerably less expensive because it would fall in line with the same assembly procedures as like a Hellcat or a Red Eye, whatever the case is. And thirdly, it helps to satisfy some issues that focus groups were running into with just the overall impression and sound of that car. So, Symphonic saying, any temptations to get a C8? No, I don't. I like the idea of the C8. I really enjoy the fact that Chevrolet has taken such a jump to make the platform so much more progressive now, to fall in line with that supercar type mentality. But no, for me, not really my cup of tea. But that being said, I love the idea of that car, and I can't wait to see what folks do with it. In fact, Pikes Performance has officially solidified their order for their C8. So be looking for your C8 content possibly on this channel to go up, only because I'm going to be hanging on the coattails of Alex's C8. Hang on just a second here. Riff, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Got the double five, got $10 contribution to the cause, man. I do appreciate that so much, my friend. Thank you very much. Really do appreciate that, man. It means a lot to me. Oh. So, man, I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Sam is saying, I finally got my truck sorted, and she rips. I like it. Let's see. Riff saying, it seems like sometimes people don't get excited about a car until it's gone. The Magnum is a good example. Let me tell you something funny about the Magnum. So, there was an SRT8 version of that car. Did anybody remember that one? I think that if any car deserved to get the Hellcat treatment, it would certainly be the Magnum. I would love to do a project like that, but, time and money being what it is. I'll tell you something though, that car, a lot of people were just blown away that car got discontinued, and it blew me away too. But then you go back and look at the sales figures of the car, and it just couldn't support itself, which sucks. It was such a neat car, but that should tell you the difference between an SUV and a sedan station wagon. These wagons just don't sell, unfortunately. Sam saying the mid-engine Mopar will have a DCT and a manual option. That would be very cool. Sam saying hopefully that transmission won't have the 47 RE. Talking about the Tremec that's going in the GT500, and I think the Vet gets a version of a similar transmission. I think Tremec's making that one too. Who knows? All I can tell you is my main takeaway, or my main focus with the C8, or with the Mopar rather, is that if it's going to be something cool, new, and exciting, please make the rivalry a true rivalry with Corvette. Right now, Ford has nothing to go up against Corvette. Corvette stands alone. Again, Corvette is its own brand identity. I would like to see something from Mopar that could at least go head-to-head with that car on the following fronts: price point, performance, and the basic overall appeal for different facets of the buying public. If they can do that the way that Corvette did, I think that they'll have a winner on their hands, and people will actually take the brand seriously. With this one caveat, and if I'm being real here, it would be a durability question on the part of the Mopar. If they build it with known durable components and make the thing to where it is bomb-proof, that is going to be the key here. They need to develop a reputation for durability that they have kind of lost a little bit with the whole lifter thing and the exhaust ticks and things like that. They need to have the durability reputation that these Hellcats were engineered with. They need to take that and waterfall that into the new Viper, or whatever they're going to call it, Banshee, or the new Cuda, whatever they want to call it. That's what they need to move that. That's what they will need to do to move that brand up and to make it actually compete. But they've got to compete with Corvette, or it's not even worth the time. See, Alt saying, "Sup, dude? Lifters recently went out of my 392. Any camshaft that sound good that you recommend?" Man, it depends on what your definition of good is. The camshaft that I designed for Pikes is a custom ground camshaft. It doesn't really, there's not really a sound to it, although you can make it chop in the tune. It's a fairly sedate camshaft, but it's it's not something that's gonna blow your mind just in terms of chop. And you got to remember that if it chops really hard in a Hemi, unless you've got some serious forced induction, usually means you got too much intake duration. And these cars, like any engine, will fall on their face with too much intake duration. So you can check out Pike's performance for that camshaft. You also have Texas Speed, which has some pretty decent camshafts as well. But just again, what's funny is that some of their camshafts and mine look a lot alike, but mine was out first. I'm not chasing anybody else's specs. One of them does look eerily similar to my personal grind, but it's not exact. As far as off the shelf, man, the Comp 270 is pretty good. Or I'm sorry, the MMX 270 is pretty good. But I just don't like the fact that it's so dead down low. And that's something else. If you're going to put a camshaft in your Hemi, just know that please don't think of it like a flipping, like an old school 350 or 360 Mopar or 351 or 302 Ford. In a lightweight car, you can afford to lose some bottom end torque to pick up power up top. You got to, and also too, those older engines that you might be used to dealing with, even the LS stuff, they didn't start out life making very much power to begin with. So any upgrade in camshaft is going to give you a significant performance increase. Your 392 is already making basically 500 horsepower, and it's a stroked and bored small block, or really, yeah, I mean, there's not really much else you can do to that engine to eke more power out of it. A cam will help, but you're going to be ham-tied a bit by your intake manifold. So it's not just the camshaft that's going to help you. You're going to need to go with a ported intake manifold, and you're probably going to want to get a fast man throttle body to go along with it. Let's see. Onyx saying, I missed my V8 5-speed Dakota. Not a lot of power, but a riot to drive. Yeah, they were. With a set of 392 gears, but they're gone as well. Yeah, gone are the times where you had these fun little hot rod trucks and cars. The Dakota was such a cool and fun truck, and it's a shame that you just won't ever see something like that ever again. Speed Freak is saying, when you install the one-piece drive shaft, does the pinion angle have to be set, or is it just a bolt-on install and ready to go? It's just a bolt-on install and ready to go. There's no way to actually change the rear end, the rear pinion angle. Actually, I should say, yeah, it does need to come down. Actually, I think it needs to come down, and it needs to face a little bit towards the passenger side, now that I think about it. But anyway, there's no way to really change that unless you go in and try to shim it down, and nobody really makes a setup or a kit for that yet. I think DSS might be working on something like that, but time will tell. We'll hopefully see some movement forward with that, but you never know. I mean, companies will say they're working on something, and then it's forever until that shows up. So it is what it is. What can I say? Rip is saying, I did not have to change the angle on mine, but I might have been lucky. Man, it's hit or miss. Some cars do fine with a drive shaft. A lot of them do not. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Rip is saying, I don't know how I donated 2 times, but man, you deserve it, buddy. I appreciate that. Hang on just a second here. Got some wildlife I got to deal with. God, this time of year, man. Southeast Texas, we get some monsters flying around here. Let's see. Sam Grable is saying Chrysler is actually ready to bring to me 412. Oh, bring the 412 to the market, the Hemi, but it was called off by Mercedes. Yeah. Somebody donated $5. It says message retracted. It doesn't tell me who donated it. Man, well, whoever did, I appreciate that. Yeah, that is true. So the ME412, I believe, was retracted by Mercedes. I think it was using a Mercedes engine too, if I'm not mistaken. Rip saying, I will say I would rather have a diff brace and not need it than not have one and need it. Yeah, Speed Freak did. Hey, thanks, Speed Freak. Appreciate that, Dillahorns. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it didn't have your name on my end. It just says, as your contribution. $4.99, brother. I appreciate it. Man, I appreciate that a lot. Thanks, man. And the diff brace, does it help? Yeah, I don't think it hurts anything. Easy Rider saying, Motor Trend dyno to 2019 GT350. Results translated to 568 horsepower and 439 foot-pounds at the crank from the Voodoo. 42 horsepower and 10 extra foot-pounds more than its ratings from Ford. The GT500 could be hiding something. True, or the dyno that GT350 was dynoed on could have been a dyno jet, and dyno jets will give you a false indication as far as how much power your car is really making. Look, the Voodoo engine is a fun engine to drive. It's not without its faults. It's also not without its failures. But what I will bring to light here is the fact that the Voodoo engine is a legit, powerful engine regardless of what issues or problems it may have. Now, that being said, I would never say that Ford may underrate their engines just a little bit, or at least with the GT500, but I don't think they're going to be hiding too much. I think it's going to be real easy to find out wherein or how much power is that the car is really making once we start seeing these things going down a drag strip. Because again, it really doesn't. I get this fan on me, man. I am sweating my ass off. It really doesn't matter what kind of power the car makes if it A, can't put it to the ground, B, can't turn a decent number at a drag strip, and C, if it's so heavy that the weight becomes a detriment by getting the thing around a closed circuit. So, and to me, the GT500 represents kind of none of that. I guess in a way, the GT500 to me represent the what was formerly known as the GT500, or what the GT500 formerly was, I should say. Correction there. Was one of the most fun street muscle cars that I had ever driven. They never really did that great at the drag strip. Part of it is because most of the guys that were driving them were not very good at driving them down a quarter mile. But man, I got to tell you, that car on the street, so much fun, man. I mean, if there was ever a car that was that quarter mile times didn't matter, circuit didn't matter, none of that stuff really even mattered at all to me, it was the GT500. In fact, if I owned a GT500, it would probably never see the drag strip. I'd be having too much fun just hooning the thing around on the street. So with the advent of the new car, look, it's just going to have to do really well on either the circuit or the drag strip or both, because without a true manual transmission, without a true automatic, it loses that romance to me for some reason. So anyway, there's that. Riff's got the devil horns in the arms, and I love it, man. Thank you. Dimitri's asking, Riff's asking, is it true that companies like Dodge and Ford underrate their cars for insurance reasons? No, it's not. They don't actually underrate their engines. You have to remember that they're dealing and they're rating them to an SAE standard that is different than what you might be used to. Although it's been out for quite a long time, SAE standard J1306- whatever uses a different temperature and different altitude, or basically a different DA to correct their engines to. Long story short, it's 4% more power. So if you're used to seeing something that makes, say, 300 horsepower, it would have been rated at 312 or maybe even 320, depending on where it was tested and how it was tested, back in, when the earlier net numbers were, I guess, being produced or being published, I should say. So just that to consider. But they don't really underrate them at all. I mean, there's not enough of an underrated amount of power there. If any, let me just stop there and say this: if any manufacturer underrates their engines, it's BMW. Holy crap! If you've never driven like even just a 330, if you've never driven an M2 or an M4, you'll figure out pretty quickly that those cars, especially on the highway, man, those things pull like you would not believe. I don't know, maybe the horses are just bigger in Germany. I don't know. Let's see. Alt is asking, how about the NSR from MMX? It's not a bad cam. I just don't like the idea of running a no spring required cam in a Hemi. The reason for that is this: for the cam to work properly, you're going to need to have a considerable amount of spring pressure to control the big valves that these Hemis have. The valves of these things are that freaking big around, so you've got to be able to control the weight of those valves. The stock cam, believe it or not, is a nightmare to deal with from a lifter point of view. The cam has got a lot of lift, not a whole lot of duration, and it ramps it up pretty quickly. And to me, that's, I think, one of the reasons why you see so many camshaft failures, or I'm sorry, lifter failures, is that these Hemi cams, to try to make the heads act right on the street, you've got to have very abrupt and very choppy load profiles to promote, well, velocity, because these heads flow like you would not believe. And so what it is you're dealing with a short duration camshaft with a bunch of lift, that is trying to promote velocity and in a certain power band, it's not really easy on lifters. So the NSR cam, a little bit more lift, a little bit more duration, tighter lobe separation angle. They work great. They make really good power, but just please, whatever you do yourself a favor. If you buy that cam, get you a set of push rods, get you some springs. That way you can actually turn the thing to a decent RPM, get the intake ported, larger throttle body, get that thing where it'll turn 6,500 RPM and you won't have to worry about it. That's, oh, and Hellcat lifters too. Hellcat lifters alone will save you a ton of headaches with that thing. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Canada guy checking in. What is happening, my man? What's happening, Canada? Kind of odd question, but is there any way you would recommend to lift the rear? Oh, any way you would recommend to lift the rear of the SRT8? Yeah, actually, if it's a Challenger or Charger, right about there. Oh, let me turn this way. Right about there, you're going to have a jacking point. And it's got a little plastic puck that hangs down from there. That's one way to lift one side. The other way you can do it is to slide the jack underneath the back, come in from the back over here, slide it, well, from the middle of the car, slide it back underneath there, and with a pad on the jack, not a puck, but a pad, because I think a puck is too small. You can lift it from the cradle itself. I don't recommend lifting from the pumpkin, but you'll have where the lower control arms on the cradle, you'll see the two humps. You can lift it from the cradle. Once you get it up in the air, jack stands go right there, right in front of the rear tire. You'll see there's kind of a space that looks like that, and go from there. So you can do it that way. Braxton's saying, I have a 6.1 with an intake, 91 cold air tune, and mid-muffler delete for straight piping with a factory X pipe and the resonators still on, and plan to delete the resonators. Will I lose power? You will not lose power, but you will lose your hearing. Rip is saying, Braxton, right, I had the same setup on my 09 SRT8, and before I put the Pro Charger on, I got 383 horsepower and 384 pound-feet of torque. That's actually good for a 6.1. And the other thing too, man, you know, people ask me, what's your favorite one? Why don't I ever talk about the 6.1s? More people don't bring them up. I love 6.1 Hemis. To me, they're the LS of the Hemi family. Built really well, very simple. They're just really good engines. Sam is asking, did you find your D100 yet? No, I haven't. So let me bring you up to speed on that. I found an unbelievably clean 6-cylinder D150, but it was a 6-cylinder. And here's my problem with the 6-cylinder trucks. If I were to build a truck, it would have to be a V8 truck, because I don't want to have to buy a brand new transmission. I'd rather have the 727 rebuilt. Which leads me to another problem, but rebuild the 727. It should already have a 9.25 inch rear end if it's a V8 truck, not an 8 3/4. So the rear end is weak in the 6-cylinders. The trans is a 904, and that doesn't even bolt to a V8. Don't even want to use it because it's made out of freaking paper mache. And obviously, leaning tower of power is adorable, but it ain't going to be in something that I want to do long smoky burnouts with. So, yeah, there's that. I have yet to find a D100 that'll work for what I'm looking to do, or at least at a price point that I'm willing to pay. So that's a long way to answer the question, and the answer is no. We're just saying, although that was with the tune, oh, and talking about his car, tune first and a can tune from Diablo. Some of the can tunes for the 6.1s are actually pretty decent. A lot of things I would change with them though. Braxton saying, yes, sir, I'm on the non-custom Diablo tune on 91, thinking about a J Green custom. Oh, Rip is still hanging out with Braxton here. Talking about roughly 10 horsepower. Let's see. Shawnee's checking out saying, good night. I'll catch up tomorrow. Thanks for the data. 309 in my near future. I like it. Braxton saying, sweet brother, love to do the 6.1. Do you have Instagram for your car? Dimitri. Rip, you're gonna have to talk to him about that because y'all know what I did with my Instagram. Deucey B saying, how do you feel about the Texas Speed Hemi cams? And looking at them, they look great. Would have no problem running with a Texas Speed cam. Braxton Wright, he said, I like that. I'm down to lose some hearing. Got to hear her talk to me. I love it. Rick's hanging out here. Let's see. Canada guy. Mine is B5 SRT8 Beast. I like it. Rip's saying, I feel like there's a lot of mods I can do to my 6.1 and I feel like I'm never going to sell it. It's definitely a keeper. He's also going on to say, although I do love my Hellcat, I'm never getting rid of my 6.1. I'll tell you this, man. 6.1s are a lot of fun, and it's a shame that they don't get the love, again, that I feel like they deserve. They are probably they're the last of the engines that are of the LS type, where it's, all it is an intake manifold, a fixed camshaft, big heads, and they do well. Here's the fun thing about 6.1s, though. One of the knocks on a 6.1 is that the heads don't flow as well as the Apache heads that are on the 5.7s and on the 6.4s and the Hellcats. Thing is, though, they flow pretty darn well. I want to say they flow about 270 CFM as opposed to like the 340 that these things flow. The big difference, though, here is that they do have good velocity, and because they have good velocity, camshaft upgrades actually seem to help those engines more in terms of, not only picking up power, because they definitely help there, but in terms of just overall performance, they'll help the 6.1, I feel like, a little bit more, because you can still use the cylinder heads without, and what I mean by that is that you don't tend to lose as much bottom end power. I get that you got the variable camshaft and all that with the later engines, but it's just, you never really get the fun factor, the feel out of those, the newer engines that you do out of the older cars. They run great. You make a ton of power with them too. Not quite up to the level of the 6.4, but it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. Sam saying, I love my 4-inch straight pipe, but my neighbors don't. I bet. What's my note, man? Rip is asking, I do feel like the Challenger is a pretty big car to have a manual, though. I had a 2008 automatic SRT8, and now I have a 6-speed 09, and it feels a lot slower than the automatic. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The 392 cars tend to pair well with a 6-speed manual, but and it's a bit of a shame too. I really like the Challengers with the manual transmissions with a 392. Not a big fan of them for the Hellcats. I think that the manual does have its place with the 392, but more as, again, just a fun car to play with on the street. I really wouldn't ever take one super seriously, but they are fun to drive. And one of the reasons why they're fun to drive is because it's like the last car, except for the Mustang. The Camaro's a little bit there, but the window is way too high in the Camaro. But it's one of the last cars that you get to feel the car moving around underneath you. Big car with a manual transmission. Nothing really, how do I put this? Nothing can get you to a old school feel, look, experience, that whole thing, the way that the Challenger can with that manual transmission. So don't worry about the fast or the speed or the whatever with that. Just, you're really talking more of an experience, long smoky burnouts and things like that with that car. That's really what I like with that car. Brax is saying, yep, not getting rid of my 6.1. The only other Challenger I would buy is a Hellcat, but not getting rid of the old girl. I like it. Rick's also saying, do you think it would really help to replace the OEM manifold on my 6.1 or just keep it? I guess you're talking about the exhaust manifolds. Yeah, I mean, the 6.1 likes long tubes. The cam profile on a 6.1 actually has a tighter lobe separation angle. So yeah, I'd go long tubes on a 6.1 for sure. If you're talking about the intake manifold, keep it. Don't worry about it unless you're going to do a different cam. And Who is it that's making the new one? Holly or somebody? Anyway, that might be a good way to go for that car. Jeffrey Bender's in saying, what up, B? I made it back in here for a late one. This heat is working my last nerve. Can't wait for the cooler weather. Yeah, me, you, and my complexion need the lower temperatures, bro. This is killing me. Rip is saying, is that you that hit me up on Instagram, Braxton? He's saying, not yet. Oh, let's see. So Fox saying, going to the strip for the first time in a month. Any suggestions, advice for my LS3 Vet on street tires? Automatic, by the way. Just roll into the throttle kind of light. Don't try to do a big smoky burnout. Just do a nice cleanup if you're on the street tires, and drive around the water. That's really all you got to do. Again, don't just watt the throttle. Get a feel for how the track prep is going to treat you that night. Roll into the throttle quick and let her eat. She'll have a good mile an hour in the big end. I think you'll have a lot of fun. Reef saying, sorry, I meant the intake on my 6.1. Yes, if it's the intake, the actual intake manifold, yeah, I mean, they flow fine. For the power level that you'll be looking at, you'll do just fine. Again, you can go the larger throttle body, make the switch over to Hellcat throttle body. There's a lot you can do to wake those cars up, but realistically, I think that you have an opportunity to just have a fun car with that 6.1. Symphonics is even saying, just going for fun, not super serious, but I also don't want to embarrass myself. Talking about the Vet, yeah, man, again, it's just roll into the throttle. Don't try to stand on it, and let the car do what it's going to do. Keep her pointed straight, and if she does anything weird, don't chop the throttle. Just roll out of the throttle, let it correct itself, and then putt down the rest of the track. If it does anything weird, but it probably won't. Don't see it freaking you out. I think you'll have fun with it. Rip saying, I was thinking about getting the Pro Charger intake on my 6.1 Challenger. I don't know if it's worth it, though. Nah, not really. Not at all. Symphonic saying, if I'm in the 12s, I'd be happy. You'll be in the 12s. Should be in the 12s. Rich saying, since I have a Pro Charger and not top-mounted supercharger on my 6.1, do you think bigger throttle body would help? It would help a little bit for throttle response under partial throttle conditions. Won't really help you for wide open, though. And hell, realistically in the tune, you can just add in more driver command torque, so you can go from there. All right, so getting back to the 309 gear and the Hellcat and how the thing ended up working out. And Driveshaft. So again, working to try to see about getting a different Driveshaft already. I will fill you guys in on the details of that later, but for right now, really not much I can do. My hands are a little bit tied. I could go back with my stock Driveshaft, and I don't think I would hurt it at this power level going to the drag strip. However, I do go to the drag strip a lot with this car. And because I go to the drag strip so much with the car, it's not a one-time shot that I think is going to hurt a stock Driveshaft. I think it's a cumulative effort. So looking for an upgrade there. But overall, I'm super happy with the 309 gear. I think that the car should have been optioned with that gear from the factory. Bit of a shame that it wasn't. But all things considered, I think it's been probably the most rewarding upgrade that I've done to the car. So your contribution dollar is at work. And bringing you this data has been fun, and it's been a fun challenge to me too. The big thing with my car was to do a true DA correction without adding any power to the car. And I think we did that pretty well. If you look at it from the point of view that we had, we had run 1060s in really good air, like 200-300 foot DAs, to be able to run that kind of a number and then go faster than that number in significantly worse altitude is saying a lot. And again, this is without adding any power to the car whatsoever. We've been able to basically drop it from being a 1090 car, 1080 car down to the 1050s, which is a significant change. And, you know, we've been able to pick up since stock, including with the gear now, you're looking at an increase of about 4 miles an hour on the big end of the track, which is a lot of miles an hour at the big end of the track for the car not having any more power. So that's also something else to consider. Rip is saying, I know the 6.4 has better download torque, so I was wondering if that would help the 6.1. You know, there's guys that have run the 6.4 manifold with a window switch and have had some pretty decent results with it. And just in terms of it picking up torque and horsepower, it's always an option. But the only thing that I will caution you on is just making sure you get the window switch set up to where you're operating the short runner valve actuator. But aside from that, I mean, yeah, that's where the 6.4 makes more power though. It's got, you know, variable cam, variable intake. I mean, it's got some magic happening to get that extra power down low. Now, yes, that power down low is a significant jump. Also, when you consider that it's got an 8-speed transmission, if it's an automatic, it makes it even that much more snappy. So, yeah, the difference in performance is vast between the two, but you can still build a very fun, very capable, very quick car out of a 6.1 just by running with some, you know, tasteful mods, you know, camshaft, open up the intake manifold a little bit, larger throttle body, long tube headers. The cars love that kind of stuff. You know, Hellcat lifters I think will still work, you know, the upgraded push rod, springs, the whole bit. Anyway, long story short, you can build a pretty capable hot rod that, in my opinion, sounds really good because it still acts like an old school V8. So in that respect, not having the extra technology actually, I think, works in your favor if you're going to build a hot rod out of it. Rip saying, I just don't like the whole long and short runner setup. Yeah, it can be a little bit annoying for sure to try to get that to work. But again, guys have made it work. It does take a window switch, but do you want to go through all of that or just run what you got? And if it were my car, I'd just run what I had. You know, maybe try to get one of those other intakes if it would, you know, be financially viable. I just don't know what they cost. SRT Craig saying, hey, what up, Mopar Professor? What's up, man? Saying my 10 Challenger SRT8 came with 309s in it and wondered if they were fairly standard with the 5-speed autos. I think the 309 for the SRT8 was standard for the autos. Might be wrong about that, but yeah, I believe they were. I take it back. Hang on a second. No, I'm thinking about the manual transmission cars. I think that some of them may have come with 262s. I think most of them came with 309. Somebody's going to have to fix me up on that. Somebody needs to course correct me on that. Rip saying, I did have a local shop do the drop-in pistons for my 6.1. Very nice. And then Braxton saying, I always thought we got a 306 rear end for the 5-speed. I can't remember if we got 309, 306. That's the Gay-Trag rear end as opposed to the ZF that we have in these. Good thing about Gay-Trag is that you can put a different gear in that unit because it is serviceable. The ZF is not. Somebody needs to fix that quickly. It's one area where Mopar really screwed up with a 1320. I mean, really screwed up with a 1320 is not having a different gear in that car. Oh, shit. Rip is saying that the Mall Motorsports is the pistons that he got. And Braxton, I never knew for sure. Yeah, I think they are 306s. Let's see. Ken is asking, does the cat overtemp hurt mile per hour in the red eye? Feels like the car flattens out a little in 4th and 5th gear. You, sir, are hitting probably a couple of temperature-based nannies if you've got a red eye. So in 4th and 5th gear, you're not going into cat overtemp in 4th, but you probably are in 5th at about 5,000 RPM in 5th gear for sure. You'll be in cat overtemp. You also may be hitting it could be, if you have a stock thermostat, there is an ECT based timing retard that you could be hitting as well. The red eye and the Demon are kind of funny. They are nannied a lot. They're also very neutered from the factory. This is something that a lot of folks don't know. When you look at the stock tune for a Hellcat, and then you look at a stock tune for a red eye or a Demon, the timing values for any given load amount are lower on the red eye and on the Demon. So let's say at air charge, if you're at 120 kilograms of air, or I'm sorry, grams of air, you would be at, let's say, 18 degrees for a Hellcat. The red eye might be at 16. I think a lot of that has to do with discharge temperature, because the 2.7 that's in the red eye and the Demon just produces more heat all the time. It's a really good heater. So they have lower timing, and I believe they have the ECT timing values are set to come in a little bit sooner. So they're in tuning a red eye or tuning a Demon, the temperature based tables are something that you really do have to change, and you can't just change them to known values. You have to basically tell them to not come on ever to get the best power out of the car. So that's a real long way to say, yes, you're probably going to go into cat overtemp. Although you got to remember, with your car, it is not pulling timing for cat overtemp. It's actually throwing a bunch of fuel at it. So your command AFR, believe it or not, is 12.7 for those cars. When it goes into cat overtemp, it's a sliding scale, and it'll go 12.7, 12.5, 12.3, 12.4, I'm sorry, 12.3, 12.2, and then it'll just start to really start throwing fuel at it. You'll see 11.0, 10.99, 10.88. It'll just kind of go yoink like this in terms of the air fuel that it commands. Let's see. Rip is saying, I haven't heard that the air fuel ratio reading in the Hellcat is off. Is that true? Oh, you have heard, rather. It is off, as a matter of fact. It's off by exactly 6%. The command AFR in a Hellcat, when you're just cruising, you'll see it show like 13.6, 13.8, whatever that number is. It's actually, you have to multiply that times 1.06 to get what it's actually commanding at that point, which is 14.7. That's where tuners go completely wrong with Hellcats. They'll use that we've seen it so many times. This is how to blow up a Hellcat 101, by the way. Going off of the in-dash wideband is a bad idea, and it's terrible that Dodge didn't freaking think about this. But sorry, this is what happens when somebody that doesn't speak Mopar tries to tune a Hellcat, or any of the more modern operating systems go off of this as well. The command fuel air, not air fuel, you're dealing in fuel air ratios. 0.0722 with the Hellcat is actually 13.6. You add your fuel adder to it, and it comes out to 12.0 from the factory, and you go, oh, 12.0, that makes perfectly good sense. Wrong. You have to then add the 7% back into it. So it's actually like 12.74% AFR is what it's commanding. It's lean from the factory. So the deal is when guys are reading it, it says 12.0 and they think that it's good. It's really not. And so people will try to fudge that number up a little bit, and you run into problems because you're way too lean. Let's see. Rip saying, I think they said it was high by 2. I think I just got through going through that. But Rip saying, just curious, would a throttle commander work for an 09 6-speed Challenger? Yeah, should. Oh, then he's asking, why do you think the reason is the air fuel? I don't know, man. I really don't. It blows my mind, and it's actually kind of weird. You would think that there would be just a patch or a fix for something like that. I mean, I like for my air fuel to be reading what the air fuel is. Now, by that standard, though, it technically is reading exactly what is being not necessarily commanded, but what the computer is using to calculate its results. But I don't understand why they use 0.0722 as opposed to 0.0688, which is actually 14.7. I've got no idea, but I can tell you that it has thrown a lot of guys for a loop, and I don't see any really good reason for it. It's weird. Floyd's checking in and saying, hey, got the thumbs up, finally caught your live chat, really like how you share your info and knowledge. Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. Dimitri's asking, this is Rift, is a wideband reading in the Hellcats for the air-fuel ratio? Yes, it is. It does have widebands in it. Jamie is asking, do you know if there's a 3 1/4 rear gear for the Challenger? Man, I would love to see a 325, a 331, 328, somewhere in that 3 1/4 to 3 1/3 range. No, there's not, unfortunately, and that ZF diff is not serviceable. Now, a Gaytrag rear end is, and here's the funny thing. I don't know this, go on DSS's website. The problem becomes, fitting an older rear end in a newer car. I don't know if anybody is doing that, but I want to say if you go to DSS's website, they've got a drive shaft for, I want to say they have a drive shaft for the older Gaytrag rear ends in the newer ZF style cars. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if there's an adapter for the bolt pattern. The bolt pattern's the same. I don't know none of that. Check that one out for yourself. But that would be the way to do it if you can do that. And I know that Motive sells a gear set. I want to say it's a 323 that would work in the Gaytrag rear end housing. So I don't know. That's something that would have to be looked into. But it'd be cool if you could do it. Floyd saying, met you a couple of Fridays ago at HRP and the Dot Tires. Oh, hey, what's up, Floyd? Yeah. Had the white 92 454 SS truck with a 582 big block. Fast truck, by the way. Very nice truck. Yeah, Floyd and I got a chance to visit shortly. Love the truck, man. 454 SSs were always a big deal for me growing up, and they're impossible to find right now. I'd love to get my hands on one of those too. In fact, speaking of trucks, the hunt for the D100 is basically on hiatus right now for me. I'm actually looking more into like the 88, 89, 90 short bed Chevys right now, just because number one, they come with a 700 R4, which is a super upgradable overdrive transmission. I can throw 410s in the thing, 373s, 410s, it wouldn't matter. Bring the truck down in altitude because they're cheap to drop. Build a 383 for the thing, throw a little bit of a tune in it, even with a TBI, and call it good. Rev it to about 5,500 RPM. Have an engine that would be better suited for a tow truck than a race car, but something that would light the tires up into third gear. That would be a riot for that. So, but anyway, Floyd's got a killer truck, man. Thanks very much, man. I appreciate you hanging out. And it was fun hanging out with you then, too. By the way, the guy in the green Challenger won the freaking bracket race again last night. That was that 1320, which that's not very fast. Rip is saying my 09 6-speed SRT8 Challenger has really bad wheel hop. What can I do to fix that cheaply? Well, you can start with, I think BMR does make a set of lower trailing arms for that car. Take a look at those. They only cost $100. Super easy to install too. They practically install themselves. Look into something like that. That could help you. And check your tire pressure. This will cost you anything. Don't try to cheat your tire pressure down. Run them at about 32 PSI. What happens is if you try to run these low profile tires too low, you do get the cupping. So instead of being perfectly flat, you'll have a cup on the street. And I've done this with pattern testing on tires. That cup, what will happen is the car will waver in traction because the tire is not stable. Get a nice flat contact patch, that will help you. But those are the two things I would look at. Take a look at the bushings, take a look at any rubber pieces underneath there, and make sure that you don't have anything cracked. Make sure everything's torqued down properly, things like that. Just give it a good once over as far as that goes. But again, lower trailing arms might help you a little bit, and check the tire pressure as well. Saying I already put a diff brace on. Yep, you're already on the right track, bud. Hey, Triple Thread saying IB, Triple stopping by to see what's up. What's up, Trip? Oh yeah, I'm getting ready, getting to buy a C8 in July for my 60th birthday. Very cool, man. Congratulations. Another July birthday in the house. I tell you what, those cars are going to be big. You know, like I say, Pikes Performance already has their order in for their C8. Lots of development is going to be done on that front with those cars. I'm looking forward to see how well the car takes to, whether it's tuning to hard parts, whatever the case is. Going to be doing a lot of development work for that platform coming up. So very excited about that, and we'll see how it goes. Again, it's pretty cool. But yes, the allocation is already set. And congrats on the new ride. Rip is saying, nice Triple. I'm jealous. I actually tried to get one recently, but it was said it was sold out. July 19th, turned 40. I'm old. Let's see. Rip and my birthdays are just a couple of days apart, and I just turned 45. So, but yeah, guys, as far as, so another thing has been asked quite a bit, what am I going to do with my car in terms of boost? Am I going to throw more boost at it? Is there something I'm going to do moving forward with the car for the channel? It's kind of tough to say, because what ends up happening is if you throw pulleys at it, you start throwing different fuels at them. The issue is that you then start to limit the scope of the car. And I like driving my Hellcat a lot, especially with that 309 gear. I'd like to do different events with the car. I'd like to start doing, half mile, maybe even full mile runs with the car. That's really more like what I'm looking at doing with the car. It's why the Driveshaft thing has got to get sorted out, because I need to make sure that it's as stable as stock at 170, 180 miles an hour. And don't get me wrong, the aftermarket drive shafts are great in terms of just being strong and getting the car down the drag strip and all of that. But, for prolonged runs of, deep into triple digits, 170, 180, you need to have something that is going to be smooth and stable and not, cause other issues for the car, other failures because of an NVH issue. So, throwing more power at the car, I got to tell you, it starts to beg the question of when do mods really start to be, when can you feel them? When is it really worth putting the mod to the car? I'm of the opinion with the Hellcats, Red Eyes, Demons, any of these Mopars, that if you don't throw a significant amount of power at the car, number one, it's not going to make a difference at the drag strip, at least not a palatable difference, number one. And number two, what is your comfort zone as far as durability, reliability? Where is that going to, what is your barometer for that? Case in point, 93 octane guys like running 93 octane because you can drive to the corner store if you had to, put fuel in the car to get you from point A to point B. But to get the most out of the car, you really need to be on E85. That can be a problem because, number one, E85 is difficult to come by for some folks, if not impossible. Two, depending on where you live, the formulation of E85 will vary as much as E70 to E90. So the fuel that you're actually putting in the car is going to vary quite a bit, which means your performance is going to be inconsistent. From a tuning standpoint, E85 is a godsend because you can throw whatever kind of timing you want to the thing seemingly, and you just don't get the detonation. You'll get a drop in power. a little bit, but E85 is a fuel that's so very friendly and so forgiving, where 93 octane is not. But again, it does come with its own set of potential problems, none the least of which is the actual quality of the fuel. I have seen on 3 separate occasions bad tanks of E85. Twice it happened to me on the dyno. Once it happened to my buddy Rob with his car when he came down to run his car here in Houston. And so that's extremely frustrating for somebody with a naturally aspirated car that has got a setup to run on E85. But it can be catastrophically bad if you get a very bad tank of E85. What I mean by very bad is, let's say the tanker driver guy is just having a bad day and accidentally fills the tank full of 87 octane as opposed to, whatever, E85 or, wherever you might happen to be. It could actually be as low as E70 if you're further north. Or if the fuel blend itself just isn't very good. It's just bad from the manufacturer. Or if the fuel comes out of basically separates. So I don't think I've heard of that happening, but any water that gets into gasoline, well, it's just, it's just a little bit of water in the gasoline. You have some moisture in there, but typically it's not much. But water in E85 is really bad because alcohol is hydrophilic. It loves water. So it's like a sponge, whereas gasoline isn't. So the water infiltration and all that just can become, anyway, long story short, because I'm dragging this way too far. I've seen problems with both 93 octane and with E85. Bad tank at E85 is really bad. A bad tank at 93 just means your NOx sensors are going to be going ape shit. And I actually have had a bad tank of gas with this car, and it was just readily apparent right off the bat. It was pulling all kinds of timing across the board. So I actually thought I blew it up, but I didn't. It was just a bad tank of gas. Let's see. Rich saying, honestly, when my account was hacked, the one thing I felt like I lost the most was being a mod on the channel. So I just want to say that I'm glad to be back. I like it. Good having you on, brother. Saying your channel has helped me so much when it comes to learning stuff about Mopars, which I'm passionate about, and other information that has always helped. Man, I appreciate that, man. I really do. Also saying, I feel like the Mopar community is a very good community to be a part of. It is. I mean, everybody I've ever met on the Mopar side's been really good to me. So I always am very appreciative of that as well. It's saying, also going on to say, I also live in California where we only have 91. Do you think it would be okay to get a 285 pulley and 10% overdrive under pulley and just use some boostane? No, I don't at all like that idea. So let me tell you why. Bravo package for us at Pikes is 10% lower, 275 upper. That's 800 horsepower on a Mustang dyno to the rear wheels. Obviously injectors and other parts are included with that. That combination on your car on 91 octane and boostane, two things would have to be, number one, so overly neutered in the tune to where the car just really won't make any power to speak of at all. And two, if you get just a bad tank of 91 or you don't put enough boostane in the tank, you're still never going to make any real power with it. If you're on 91 octane, I will say this for your Hellcat. Run 91 octane with boostane with your stock tune. That will be more beneficial than trying to throw more boost at it. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear, and I understand that. Believe me, I do. But knowing how these computers work, knowing how the stock tune works, helps me to make that advice. Let me just tell you this. Normally, a Hellcat on good 93 octane going down the drag strip, healthy Hellcat, good quality gasoline, you're still going to get a couple of degrees of knock retard right after a shift has been completed, you'll start to see a little bit of knock retard come in, and then it pulls it out on its way up through the power band. These cars hang on the knock sensors in terms of timing. The same way that the Demon relies on the knock sensors to tell what fuel quality is actually in the car. So what does that mean? It means that if you are on 91 octane, you're going to see more short-term knock retard than I will on 93. And that's what I mean by it hangs on the knock sensors. The stock computer actually in a Hellcat throws a lot of timing at the car, a significant amount of timing, I might add. And then we'll start to pull it back if it thinks that there's knock or there's a temperature that it doesn't like that it's getting to with engine coolant temperature or inlet air temperature, doesn't matter. It'll start to drag that timing back. You can actually pick up power with a 91 octane fuel just by giving it a little bit more octane and getting it a little bit out of that knock that it's trying to mitigate. Now, how much? Not a lot. I mean, you're only talking about 1 degree. Instead of pulling 2 degrees, it might pull 3, which is not that big of a deal on a Hemi. Hemis don't like a lot of timing anyway. But for your Hellcat, that's something to consider. But don't throw more boost out of it in an effort to get more power out of it if you're going to run it on 91. It is a bad idea. And there are folks that may disagree with what I'm saying. That's fine. But not to fuck it. Look, I've got plenty of data logs on my own car with 93 octane, and with 93 octane that hasn't been the greatest, but it's still 93 octane, I guess, coming out of the ground, where it's pulled 3.5 degrees of timing, like consistently. And I mean, that freaked me out to the point I'm looking at, I'm logging misfires. I'm going, okay, misfire code, no misfire code, misfires look great. It was just a bad tank of gas. And at that time, I threw a couple of gallons of 100 octane race gas in it, just regular Sunoco unleaded 100 to chill it out. That's when I found out the car loves 100 octane. But I found out the problem because I was data logging the car. If you get a bad tank of 91 octane, it could end up being 89. I'd rather have a bad tank of 93 that comes out to 91 than try to run boost through something that is 89 octane. Again, keep that in the back of your mind, and unless you've got direct line of sight access to race gas, I would not throw more boost at your car if all you have is 91 octane. I hope I have worn that point out. Riff saying, what do you think the best setup would be for 91 octane? I think I covered that. I'm really worried about doing too much to my Hellcat after seeing so many videos of people blowing up their cars, for example, Speedy's garage. Yeah, so look, bummer about Speedy, okay? I know that video is pretty old. A lot of his stuff is time delayed. Really bummed out though that happened, but that does happen when you're trying to throw a lot of power at something using 91 octane. And again, I'm not saying that it was tune related. Mike at over at OST knows what he's doing. This could simply be a fuel quality issue. And when you're leaning on a car pretty hard, you got to have the fuel to go with it. And I don't know because I'm not there. I haven't talked to him. I don't know what exactly happened to his car. Don't know what he replaced anything with for the replacement engine or whatever went in the car. But I can tell you that that's why I recommend not doing much with these cars unless you have good quality, high octane fuel to fall back on. It's why I didn't add any timing with my own car. And I know how to tune these things. I mean, at least my own stock car I can tune. And so, I'm not going to say anything about my tuning prowess for, cams or throwing a ton of boost at these cars, but I can kind of work my way around it. And I know from experience what these cars can deal with and what they can't deal with in terms of fuel quality. And I'm also tempering what I know in terms of just mass propulsion. I know what the load is, cylinder pressures that you're going to see. Trying to get something that's this heavy moving in that direction is tough to do. So lots of cylinder pressure, lots of load, and you just have to be careful with that. That's the main thing. So yeah, my recommendation is err on the side of caution and you'll be just fine. Riff saying, I wanted to get around 800 horsepower with rear wheels with a Hellcat without having to run race fuel all the time, or at least having two different tunes, one for race fuel and one for pump gas, if that's possible. That is possible, but you're going to have to make sure that you're cool with the investment of getting your, making sure that you're swapping tunes, which is easy to forget when you leave the track and you don't put your 93 octane tune back in the car. But the main thing with that is, yeah, if you're going to have the two different tunes, now you've got to go through the headache of basically running your tank basically to empty or evacuating your tank, which is nightmarish to begin with, although the new fuel rails do have a Schrader valve. But the big issue that you're going to run into if you go that route is just the headache of managing the race gas, adding, how much, making sure, okay, I've got so much 91 in the tank, what race gas do I run? You're going to have to run 104 as opposed to 100 unleaded, mainly just because you want to mitigate any 91 that you have in the tank. So there's that to consider. There's a lot of weird things you got to consider when you're dealing with putting a tune together and running a car on two separate tunes, when realistically, if you just made the switch to E85, you can just run E85 all the time and not worry about it. That's only if, number one, E85 is available, and number two, you're willing to go through all the headaches that come with E85, such as more frequent oil changes, locating and making sure you map out E85 stations on whatever route you're on if it's a long way, there and back. The drop in fuel economy, getting there and back, that's another thing to consider as well. So there's a lot that goes into it, and man, if you're stuck with 91 octane, don't get me wrong, you can get more power out of the car on 91 octane. I just want to implore that you understand the risks that you're taking moving away from a stock tune and trying to throw timing at a car that's already taking timing out of the car going down the drag strip on 93 octane, and even more so on 91. Kid's checking in saying, what do you think ET diff is going to, wait. Oh, I see what you're saying. Kid's asking, what do you think the ET difference is from going with slicks and skinnies? I'm saving 80 pounds in the front and 25 in the rear. Saying, wow, those 20 by 11s are heavy. Yes, they are. If you are going from the stock wheel and tire setup, 20s with the Pirellis, and let's say you're running tri-5s in the rear, we have to assume some type of a drag tire in the back, because if you're talking about bone stock, you'll never get a reliable number out of the car bone stock. If you're talking about tri-5Rs in the back, or MT, ET, Street SSs in the back, something along those lines, you're looking at a difference of about 1/10 and a half and about 1.5 miles on the back end of the track. That's what you're going to be seeing by getting away from the 20s and going with a lighter weight wheel and tire setup. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a huge difference when you're going down the drag strip, because that margin of victory is a couple of car lengths at this speed. So I guess really that would be the biggest in terms of just empirical data. However, the way that the car launches and your confidence with getting the car down the drag strip will go up exponentially. So what I will typically tell guys is, look, Let me help you bridge the gap a little bit. Get you a set of 18-inch Bravadas, throw a set of ET Street R's on the back of it. Take the car down the drag strip. There's not going to be a big difference at this power level by running skinnies up front, half a tenth on the skinnies. Okay, the big difference is going to come in the rears. That's what's driving the car. That's the real powered reciprocating mass, as opposed to just a tire, which is mass. You can say, well, it's lower rolling resistance. No, it's not. It's just not. It's not lower rolling resistance. You want to reduce the powered mass that's being twisted, not that's being pushed. That will get you practically as big of a difference, at least a tenth, and about a mile an hour and some change on the back half of the track. If you still want to go, and it's easier, because doing the fronts is a pain in the ass on these cars. The rears, you already have your jacking pucks in place. You just lift it, pull the backs off. Bravados are a acorn style, shank. It blanked out on us. Here we go, back in the mix. So they're easier to work with. I would say do that first, unless you are just absolutely chasing a number. If you're doing this for fun and just not really trying to collect data or do anything like that, that's really where the smart money is spent, and you'll get almost all the results at a significantly less cost. X is checking in saying there's some 93 pumps around Santa Cruz. I get some every time I'm down there. Man, I miss Santa Cruz. Love Santa Cruz. Speed Freak is asking, where's a good place to pick up a drag pack like I have? The forums is the best place to pick up a drag pack like I have, because my drag pack is beat the hell out of. But that's because I run my car a lot. They're on and off the car a lot. To me, drag packs are a consumable item. And although they're a long-term investment, they're a durable asset, they are still something that's going to have to be replaced at some point. Check out the forums. A lot of guys get drag packs, run the car maybe 20 times at the drag strip and get bored with it and want to do something else, whatever, move on, so they offload them there. If not, check out the Summit, Jegs. I think any of those places will sell the Dark Stars. So still some very good places to get these get these wheels new. However, pick up a set from one of the forum members, help them out, and unless you just have to have something new, which there's some merit to that too, depending on how well they were taken care of. But those are the two areas you can go. Go to the forums or go to I think it was Jegs has them. Jegs typically has them on sale almost all the time, I think. Let's see, Rift. Rift is saying that he raced another Hellcat one time that had a drag pack set up on it, and he beat him by a good amount of time, so it's definitely worth it. Yes, it is. Let's see, Rift's also saying, I was actually worried about putting the video up on my YouTube because he ran in the 10s and I ran in the 11s, all because he had a drag pack set up. Saying, I did have a 20-inch Mickey Thompson's one-piece drive shaft and diff brace, but he had the front skinnies and 18s on the back, which made a difference. They absolutely do. And again, I can't say this enough. The 18-inch Bravada setup is probably my favorite setup for these cars, just from a convenience versus rewards standpoint. In other words, with the long shank style lug nuts that these things have, it can be a bit of a pain. Some guys don't like the hassle with them. You do have to run hub-centric rings on these types of wheels, so there's something to be said there too. It can be, again, be a bit of a pain. There's a bit of a learning curve. There's a bit of a finesse to getting these wheels on and off the car. You do have to torque them down. There's a lot to it, so I don't necessarily recommend them for everybody. They're not a good fit for everybody. However, if we're talking about, somebody just going to the drag strip, again, you can get almost all the benefits of a drag pack by just throwing a set of Bravados in the back of the car. And will it be as good as a drag pack? No, it never will be in terms of covering a number. But again, if you're just going down there to have fun, have a good time, and you want to be able to, go watt on the light, then man, I say go for it in that respect. You'll have a ton of fun, and to be honest with you, the car's not going to feel any different going down the track one way or another. The only place you'll see a difference is on that time slip. Beast392 saying, hey, what's up? Race stars and skinnies with Mickey Thompson's on my Scat Pack Charger make a huge difference. Yeah, they made a big difference on Shalandra too, man. I'll tell you what, that car, God, it was so easy to launch. With this one too. I mean, it's the same wheel and tire setup on this car that I had on the 392, and it loved it. Made a huge difference, and it made the car just that much more fun to run at the drag strip. So, my biggest takeaway is, it made the car not only more fun, but I wasn't beating up my street setup in the process, which, is something to be said, because those tires are expensive and they don't last very long with a lot of track use. ET Street R's last a darn long time too, so it's not like you're buying a set of tires that's only going to last you a few trips to the drag strip. I can't tell you how many passes I have on these ET Street R's. A lot, and so definitely well worth it. Ripped is asking, why are the front skinnies so hard to put on? The reason why the fronts are so hard to put on is the hub is very deep because it's only a 6-inch wide rim, so the hub is very deep to bring that thing out, and because of that deep hub, the lug nut fits way in there. The other thing is that it is a true shank style lug nut, so the lug nut itself, I don't have any extras sitting here, they're all holding wheels on the car, about that big around and about that long. And you've got to get the wheel just right on those hub-centric rings and get those lug nuts started. And because of that, they can bind up a little bit in the wheel as they're going in. That can be part of what makes them a little sticky to put on. Honestly, though, if you've done it enough times, it's really not that big of a deal. I don't recommend lubing them or anything like that. You certainly don't need to do that. And you really kind of don't want to do that. If you feel any real resistance, you just kind of move the wheel around a little bit while you're tightening it. Get the open-ended lug nuts. You should be good, unless Tech is being really surly about it. I mean, you should be able to get away with it, no problem. But that's why it's just the way that they're made. Yeah, and you got it right. Yeah, it's just harder to put the lug nuts back in. Get them off is easy. And then B saying it's day and night, I use them on the street. Yeah, I kind of use these a little bit on the street too. Actually, I use this setup for all my street data logging. I use my my street setup for stability testing, for fuel air ratio, making sure everything's cool for command on downshift, stuff like that. Is the only real thing I use my street setup for street data logging, because they just don't hook the way that these will on the street. Now, I limit the amount of use for the ET Street R's on the street, mainly because they're just a transport tire on the street. They get me from point A to point B, which is, from point A to the drag strip. And then, of course, I do use them for some street testing, but I don't like to use them too much, although they were invaluable testing with the 309 gear, because the Tri-5Rs just would never hook, even on a second gear roll, where these hook up just fine, which makes the 309s a lot of fun to drive, but just hard to collect data on. Ken is asking, would you change to aluminum one-piece drive shaft and red eye over the heavy Demon drive shaft, setting about 8 pounds? Any ET difference? No ET difference whatsoever. Let me tell you what the fallacy is with drive shafts. The reason why I switched to a one-piece on this car was because it does spend so much time at a drag strip. But a a red eye drive shaft or a Demon drive shaft is a significant upgrade. In fact, let's see. Yeah, I think we're going with this. The red eye has the same drive shaft, I believe, as the Demon, and I can tell you that because you cannot order a red eye drive shaft unless you own a red eye. Same kind of goes with the Demon. You can't order Demon parts unless you own the Demon. But anyway, getting to it, you have an inertial load when you're talking about drive shafts. The smaller the tube diameter, the easier it is to twist. The larger diameter, that 4-inch, is actually harder from an inertial load point of view. So the smaller diameter makes up for the difference in inertial load versus the 4-inch being a long one piece. As far as weight goes, no, there's not going to be any significant difference, I don't think, one way or another from one to the next, especially when you consider that part of the weight that you're talking about is the carrier bearing itself in the middle. You take the carrier bearing out, there's no real weight difference there. So all things considered, with the amount of power that these cars make, that weight variance is going to be nil at best. Very, very slight. Dimitri's asking, this is Riff saying, how much more power can the Demon or Red Eye engine handle compared to the stock Hellcat? Significant amount, I'd say 20% more, but let me just preface that by saying Hellcat engine's good to about 1,200 horsepower, and it's been documented and proven by quite a few guys that 1,000 horsepower is easy money with a Hellcat engine. So is there more overhead there? Not really. Demon engine, Red Eye engine may be able to manage more power, but if you're never going to get to that point, then it doesn't matter, and it has more to do with the piston than it does anything else. If you've ever seen a Demon piston, it looks like it's right out of a Molnar catalog. I mean, it's a pretty stout unit. So a little bit better internals, but they're both extremely durable engines. Rift is asking, will my one-piece drive shaft in my Hellcat fit on a Red Eye if I upgrade to a Red Eye? I'll answer that question by saying this. I know that the drive shaft part number from DSS is the same for Challengers, whether you've got a Challenger Hellcat or a Demon. So for that, I would say, or by that standard, I would say that it will work. Now, that being said, make sure you verify that, but I believe that it will. I've heard that the Demon and the Red Eye, I've heard both ways. I've heard that it's a direct swap, and I've also heard that there's been issues. So I don't know, man. I would say check that out. But in terms of what part number goes with what car, my DSS with CV joints on either end, keep in mind there's not a lot of play there for the DSS, for those CV joints to move around, is the same part number for both cars. Rift is saying, I feel like upgrading to a Red Eye engine would be cheaper than trading my Hellcat for a Red Eye later on. Actually, all you'd have to do is pull that engine out, throw Molnar rods and pistons in it, and you've got your Red Eye and your Demon rotating assembly. There's nothing that's different aside from that. Jamie's checking in and saying, interesting in running the Texas Mile next year. What mile an hour do you think a Scat Pack Challenger A8 should run in the mile? 140, I know for a fact, is in the half mile. I would say 160, 170, somewhere in that range maybe. Not sure. It'd be a fun way to find out, though. Get out there and do it. Well, guys, I am coming in at right at 2 hours. My voice is about to check out. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us tonight. For those of y'all that contributed to the cause, again, thank y'all very much for that. I truly do appreciate it. And hopefully tonight we answered some questions, get you guys some info on 309 gears and all the the fun and the neat stuff that came with that, with getting this thing to the track. The neat part about it is solid gain, solid increase in mile an hour at the big end, definite drop in ET. So at any rate, guys, thank y'all very much. Riff's checking out. He said, right on, man, glad to get back to chat my own account. I like that. Saying, hope you have a great night. Thanks for all the info. Absolutely. Thank you, and thank everybody else, and y'all have a fantastic rest of your weekend. That's a wrap. Adios.